welcome to March's Business Insights. Today we are discussing, well, we've got an engineering and manufacturing forum, and today the focus of the conversation is going to be on sustainability, because coming out of the pandemic, as everyone's changing their working practices, people are looking at better, newer, different ways of doing things, and it's great to be able to put sustainability on the agenda. So the reason why we're talking about this is, well, as everyone probably knows, is sustainability is moving its way up the priority list for a vast number of engineering and manufacturing companies, and is seen as a crucial component of maintaining competitive advantage. So it's a term that covers a couple of definitions. I just wanted to explore, just to give those definitions. And the first being, it's the avoidance of depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. So it's basically the pursuit of environmental sustainability. And then on the other side, you've got the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level, which is the sustainability of economic growth, which absolutely both are very imperative towards the sustainability initiative. So at this stage, it's probably just best to go around the room. If everyone, if everyone can give their instructions, and then we can go on and move on to some questions. So just quickly myself, I'm Sian Thomas, the founder of Integro Sales Solutions, and I'm a sales consultant for manufacturing businesses. So I'm just going to pick on people to go around the room and just give a brief introduction. If I start with Simon, would you like to explain a bit more about what you do and your business?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sian. Good afternoon, everybody. Simon Shuker. My company is called Hafren Associates. I'm an engineer and a technologist. I spend a lot of my time finding and progressing renewable energy schemes of various types, anaerobic digestion, energy from waste, but also in terms of progressing innovations that are around. And one of the ones I've got at the moment is a hydrogen augmentation device for diesel engine. So sustainability for me is very important, as is the reuse of resource.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm just going to go around the room in order as I see everyone. And I'm going to invite Phil, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi Sian, afternoon to everyone. Phil Coley from iPlus Group. We are a specialist outsource company. I suppose we're slightly unique. We work in the manufacturing and engineering sector amongst other sectors, but we have both a foot in the UK and also a foot in France as well. And that has been a significant change for us as a business. The clients we work with, a number of those are in renewables, and I suppose I can bring a slant from a French side, particularly with renewables, particularly with wind being one of the big ones here in France, and also solar as well. So for me, sustainability as well as renewables, but also a couple of our clients work in automotive as well and transportation. Right. So it's really interesting in those sectors, the challenges that there are for sustainability.
Fantastic, thank you. And Les, good morning or afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Dr. Les Briggs. I'm a business advisor working with startups, funding, that type of thing. I'm currently working with biodegradable futures of biodegradablefuture.com. It's got an additive that when in the manufacture of plastics, makes the plastic's 100% biodegradable, which is, to me, that's an extremely exciting thing, because you've got your sustainability, you've got your biodegradability, you've also got a lot of the, why did we have plastics in the first place? It's instead of chopping down loads and loads of trees. Now, if we go back down to chopping down loads of trees again, instead of plastics, what does that mean? That we don't have all the trees that we need. So if we can get a biodegradable plastic out there that biodegrades in landfills, it doesn't produce the microplastics or nanoplastics, wouldn't that be a benefit? And that would be massively sustainable for everybody.
Absolutely. So, thank you everyone. Really some, interesting experience among you all. So if I'm just going to open up the question then, because I've just provided two different definitions of sustainability. So how can we ensure that we adhere to one principle without adversely affecting the other? And can the two objectives be achieved without compromise? So if we just touch upon, in terms of economic growth, and, maintaining it, because, post-Brexit Britain, our new relationship with within our society, how can we sort of maintain that whilst not causing a detriment to the environment? Does anyone have any, let's open to the floor.
Shall I make a quick start? I
Yeah,
think from the point of view of where we are at the moment, we're several industrial revolutions down the line from the original industrial revolution. And don't forget that a lot of our issues that we have nowadays globally in the UK and regionally are all to do with and rooted in the basis and the resource mistreatment, if you like, that was needed to really spin the wheels of an industrial revolution from medieval society, agrarian society, into an industrial society. And we've now gone through several phases of that in terms of different industrial revolutions. I mean, now we're in an industrial revolution that is largely virtual. We're looking at an awful lot of robotics, a lot of AI, and an awful lot of very intense software and cloud-based development. Now, the challenges and the production of waste and the reuse of resources now is far different, very greatly different from what we had in terms of what's buried in our Victorian landfills, for instance. If we look at what we're throwing away today, it really will be nowhere near the same as what we threw away all those years ago. And don't forget that the view now of resource is that those landfills themselves will be resources in themselves, and the production of raw materials from them will, I think, become more and more important. So the sustainability agenda is really very heavily based on what we've done wrong in the past. It really has been a series of disaster cases, and now we've got the opportunity, especially coming back from COVID as we are now, to do things in a slightly more responsible way, because we have to. That's the way it goes. It is as simple as that, in my view.
Does anyone have anything that they want to add on that?
I think, Sean, from my perspective, and I think Simon's absolutely right, and I think if you're looking at the whole sustainability, it's not just the supply chain, it's not just from I suppose field to table in some ways, if you want to use a farming analogy, but it's also in terms of manufacturers. It's not just the raw materials they're using, but it's also how environmentally friendly can their plants be? Are they going to be recycling water? And particularly there's a lot of investment now in water coming off the top of industrial premises, and I think that is one area. But can you tap into solar and wind? It's also saying, right, are we going to be sustainable and environmentally friendly in terms of our manufacturing process, but also everything around it, just on the site? And I think that's one thing I've seen with some of the larger manufacturers that we deal with, that they are investing in that, because at the end of the day, it lowers costs, but it's also, it has the environmental credentials. But I suppose still the challenge we probably face in manufacturing, or probably say consumer goods, is getting it's getting the price right, and it is dictated by that. If you look at some of the great British manufacturers, say in the clothing sector, there are still some that are still producing in this country. I saw a recent program, and I've actually been privileged to go around the site of the Barber coats, a great historical thing. They still produce in the UK. And they're really proud to do that up in Newcastle. But you look at other manufacturers of what we would say are traditional British brands, and I won't name them.
Yeah, I think
there
we
are
know
2 or 3 that it's not produced in the UK. So I think there's still that, and that is driven by the consumer and price as well. So that is a challenge we've got to come over.
100%. I just wanted to add just something quick to that. Having spoken with, I think the textiles industry is a really strong one to demonstrate this point, because, in terms of sustainability, and this is why it's such an interesting question in terms of growth, is, we want to promote brand Britain, UK manufacturing for a multitude of reasons, because, we're talking supply chains. If you're not having to rely on external supply chains, and this links into the whole Brexit, the rules of origin argument, which we'll probably explore a little bit later, is how do we how do we, source the materials that goes into the process. I was talking to a textiles manufacturer who unfortunately had to pivot their business in during the pandemic, saying that all of this is really good, but obviously if the consumer's not going to support it by being willing to pay more because it's a British produced product, then that poses a problem. And then on the flip side of that, have you got, if you're going to produce something in the UK, have you got the people equipped to do that? Because then we've got to rely on the skills of people. It's by no means is it commoditized. It's a skilled work being a sewer and doing all of those things, but those qualifications, those things aren't coming through the educational establishments. So that's why it's kind of looking at the broad sustainability in sort of like a broad way. It's about the skills, the environmental impact, and and heading towards growth. So I'll just open that up.
I think the economic change is the big driver of all businesses, but we've also got to consider that if you're producing things that now in China, it's costing more because the middle class, again, there's more middle class there, and they want more money to be able to do it. So is it going to be as cheap as it was before?
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be sustainable?
Yeah.
So it swings and roundabouts. I think it's going to come back to the UK. We also, as you say, with the education, we still don't have hold of the type of education we need to drive businesses in the UK. There is a change coming with that, but how has COVID sort of held that back? Has that moved things forward a little bit more? Not too sure of that, because I mean, I'm a governor of an SEN school, and we're looking at the qualifications and the needs of the kids in there to be able to be useful beings, useful people in the community at a later date. So we are trying to say, well, what is needed in the local economy? What is needed in the regional economy for these children to be able to be useful people in the future? And that's a lot of the questions are still going round and never going to be answered, because nobody knows exactly what we're going to do. But I think sustainability, we've got to be across all aspects of health economics, everything else. I mean, if you look at the NHS, they want to be carbon neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they can't be carbon neutral unless everybody else is, because the supplies and everything else on top of that have to provide a carbon neutral credentials as well. So if they don't conform to that, the NHS will not buy from them in the future. So there's going to be a change in direction of logistics, of supply and demand to be more sustainable. And hopefully with the funding and everything from the government, I think that will be able to supply most of these. But I think there's got to be a mind change with everybody in the country in terms of how we sustain things, what's finite, what's our resources, and have a greater understanding of what we can actually do with what we haven't got and what we can do with what we've got, which is a very different thing to what we've had in the past.
Yeah, it's massively interesting. You're saying that it's about joined up thinking. So, we've touched upon it. Phil, you were saying about sort of like shift in consumer behaviour, because we've been very fortunate that convenience has been at the core of everything we do. So it's are there any things that you could suggest, like how could you sort of like create shift in consumers so that basically businesses are able to provide things in a more sustainable way that's helps create jobs and benefit society at large?
I mean, I think for me, just picking up on that question, I think there's two key things just I'd like to raise and be interested on that is if you look at the new consumers who will be growing, so I'm talking about millennials. Millennials are a lot more aware of the environmental things, and they are looking at green credentials of companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they are shopping and they're looking at British manufacturers, they are much more aware about green credentials. And I think if that's the mindset now and going forward over the next 20 or 30 years, then one would hope that will start to change that one. But I do see conversely that if you look at particularly engineering and manufacturing is where are the engineers of tomorrow coming from? Because it's not a sexy thing to get into. And I suppose, if you look in Cheltenham, let's just talk about Cheltenham for a moment. One of the biggest growth sectors in the whole of the UK is cyber. Yeah. And more youngsters are going into technology, and the word engineer might be there, but it might be a software engineer or similar. So that is a challenge when cyber is growing at such a rate. And yeah, I might be localized with that, but it's still a thing across the whole of the UK. So our consumer of tomorrow may well be really on the green credentials, but are we going to have the employers and the employees available to produce that? And I think that to me is a real challenge.
So I think that kind of touches upon your area, Simon, where we've had a conversation about sort of like this all links into demand generation, and you work with a lot of businesses who are looking to to answer those big problems. For instance, it's well publicised in Bristol. They've got their carbon targets. And I think just recently in Bath, that's obviously you can't, they're going to impose massive charges on heavily sort of like diesel vehicles going into the city. So, while there's a technology there, that's, for instance, in our conversation, with vehicles that says, we want to be sort of like go electric. That's a great wish list, but we're not quite, we're not quite there. So I wanted you to sort of touch upon the transition from going from where we are to how we can get to where we want to go.
It is. I'd agree entirely with you, Phil, on that. Your point that the consumers coming through and the workers coming through, because they are the same people, are a lot more savvy on the sustainability of the products that they buy, the jobs they're going into, and the employers that they're going to go and work for. That's becoming a significant let's see who I can work for, who is going to treat me in the right way, who's going to treat the environment in the right way. So companies are not only going to have to be looking at their sustainability credentials from a reporting point of view, as in share owners and everything else, but also by the credentials that are perceived by the public and by their employees as well. So that's very important. I think it's becoming more and more important. And to be quite honest, the big thing about what jobs are we going to have in a few years, well, the big thing is that we've no idea what jobs we're going to have in a few years because they haven't been invented yet. It's as simple as that. We know we're in a transitional phase, and you're quite right, Sean, that the situation we are in now with energy, transportation, fuels, sustainability of any of those will be vastly changed within 5 years. And I think the last 12 months of lockdown will actually change the way that we think about the next 5 years very strongly. Now, it's no good putting in a vast electric vehicle network for charging and getting people to a price level on buying electric vehicles that means that they will buy them because they can, one, afford them, and two, recharge them, when half of that electricity that they're supposedly using is not renewable anyway. So that's largely, what's the point? You've actually, unless your hydrogen that you're putting into the bus is green hydrogen, not blue hydrogen, i.e. derived from fossil fuels, there's no point. It might not be emitting emissions now, but it's embodied carbon within the thing itself, and the whole fact that it's running on electricity from a non-green source or hydrogen from a non-green source is defeating the object. And I think at the moment, the different strands of development that are coming out need to be a lot more focused. They need to have government support in the right areas as that develops. We've heard Boris talking about that before Christmas in the hydrogen hubs, hydrogen towns, hydrogen cities. It's very important. And I think in terms of how energy transition goes off into the future, I think it needs to be a lot more cognizance of Are these things really the right way to be going? Are they the right directions, or are they just convenient for us to do? That's a big change. It really is.
So that's quite a lot to think about. So how's it in France? We were talking about France. How are they managing the process from that point of view, because they are very sort of like renewable. They're very renewable focused.
I mean, I think wind and solar in France is a big thing. I mean, wind particularly. You do see the countryside with many wind turbines, and they're very committed to getting their goals on renewable energy. And yes, it's the country is obviously 5 or 6 times the size of the UK, but they're very much looking to it. But I might just drift off that for a moment, but still stick on the French one, which is interesting, which comes back to consumers. Is that I run our operation here in France, so I'm immersed in the culture of France. But if you go out in the towns and you look in the car parks, the one thing that's really evident is the French still buy French. And I think, that's one of those things that we talk about the UK and everything else like that. We talk about millennials or any ages, but in France, if you look at all the cars, they're going to be Renaults, they're going to be Citroens, they're going to be Peugeots. That's pretty much it. And also in terms of most of the government vehicles, so be that the military, be it the police, they're going to be vehicles that are made in France. And I think, that's the other thing that you look at. And yes, in France, there is a high percentage of the population is employed by the government, but the government is investing in those companies that are either French owned or manufacturing in France. And I think, to me, when you talk about France, that probably is one of the things that in the UK, you don't see that level of, we probably haven't got any British cars anymore of a standard note, but in France it's so evident. And for me, bringing that slant from France, that to me would be a real thing that I would say maybe that's the point to start, is maybe the government starts to invest in British companies that are still manufacturing in the UK.
And there is a very strong UK manufacturing base. I was only looking the other day. I mean, if you think about it, when you see excavators, okay, you got, I won't mention the names, but you see Far Eastern excavators dominating the market, Japanese and Korean. But I was looking on the internet, and I'm connected with him, a guy, and he makes a lot of very, very highly specialist but very rugged excavator buckets and jibs, and to a really very, very high standard, because in that world, that is the consumable. Consumable is the tools that you're using, the machine tools at the end of the gear, and it is made in the UK. It's not Korean, it's not Far Eastern, it's UK made. Absolutely brilliant. And the more of that we can support with UK money and UK funding and government funding, the better for all of us.
So Les, how does this fit in with you then, your research?
Well, my research, I'm finding people like industry is, the manufacturing industry for the plastics and the polymers. They are very excited about sustainability. It's something they need to do, they have to do. It's something they haven't done enough with, I believe. And I mean, if you've got something that adds to a product that makes it, reduces the carbon, increases the biodegradability, it should be a plus to any. I mean, you could, if you're going to have a product that's going to be sustainable and have plastics reused in it as well, that is a definite positive. Mm-hmm. And I believe if it were this naively or not, that nothing should be made now that's not either biodegradable or reusable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
If they are, it has to be very, very specific, rather than it's got to be reusable. Got to be reusable.
I just wanted to follow up that point. Something that's very anecdotal, because most of us do a lot of recycling these days. Where I live in North Somerset, it's they're very good. They're very good with it. But on the flip side, in terms of plastics, there's so many sort of, there's so many different sizes, so many different sort of variants of plastics. It's really confusing. So you think anything from like a film wrap to sort of like kind of a box is something that you can dispose of, but still, a lot of things don't get picked up, and which is really, and so you've got to try and look at the cradle to grave element of it. What can you recycle? What can you reuse? And when we sort of try and recycle some plastics, it gets left behind because they won't take it. But surely, if in that case, then there's got to be some kind of redeployment, and that's a curious area.
It depends on the local system as well of what they can deal with, but also only 10% of the plastics are recyclable or reusable in the world.
Wow.
So there's 90% to go at that's floating about doing nothing. We need to do something with it. It's not a well, we might do it. It's a must, because we've got, our bodies have plastic in them, microplastics, nanoplastics in them. Now, we're holding our own plastic. So we've got to start and be more recyclable. And, what's that plastic doing to everybody? Silicon, plastic, things like that, tires. How do we get rid of tires?
Yeah.
We need to do something. And there's more research out there. There's lots of things going on. Research is actually looking at various different aspects of how do we recycle, how do we denature, how do we reduce it, how do we reuse it. The problem is that, plastics can be used for roads, but that also causes plastic problems with the nanoplastics and things like that that's going into the sea. So we've got to get it right. You can't just say, well, we recycle or we reuse. It's what it's used for and what you do afterwards. That's your sustainability. You've got to
it's all these big questions that just we need to sort of really look into. And it's at this point just wanted to welcome Mike to the.
Hi there. Sorry, how are we?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I've got it on good authority. This is something that you're an authority on. So if you can just introduce yourself and please share your insights.
Thanks very much. Sorry it's a bit late, guys. We're trying to get a tender in to a large amount of council work, and they've sprung a load of new requirements on us. So I'll probably dip in and off camera a little bit because I've got some stuff I need to read in amongst the course. So I do apologise. So we're an IT, so Blackmore Computers, we're an IT sort of recycling business. So we deal with IT equipment when it reaches its end of its first life. So typically large businesses are on a 4 to 5 year refresh cycle. So we would then collect the equipment. First job would be to data sanitize it to make sure people are GDPR compliant. And then we work very much on the environmental side of it. So we look to reuse as much equipment as possible that comes in. So we look to refurbish the equipment that comes in, and then we would look to resell it and then extend its working life. What we can't refurbish and reuse whole, we'll then harvest the valuable components from it, and then we'll sell those valuable components. So, on an expensive laptop, the actual motherboard from an expensive laptop could be worth £250, £200.
Okay.
Sometimes they're not worth that. And then what we cannot reuse ourselves and recycle ourselves, we go to downstream partners. So we work on a zero to landfill basis, and all of our downstream partners are audited by the Environment Agency and have to pass certain tests, and we go to see them each year. But we are doing more work on that side of things because we feel there's a lot more in this country around precious metal recovery, a lot more around use of plastics. I think we have fielded an awful lot of equipment, actually, not so much from ourselves, but certainly from the IT disposal industry as a whole, probably ends up being stockpiled in China and places like that to be worked on at a later date. So it's going back to the point you're saying earlier. Although we think we're recycling, we're not actually recycling. We're just passing the buck to somebody else, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But I mean, as an indication, every laptop that we can bring back into life saves about 90 kilos of carbon. So there's a real demand, real importance in terms of what we do. There's a lot more emphasis on a sort of circular economy and sort of, if you've got expensive equipment being used by, large businesses, if we can sell that back into the community, probably 4 years on, it probably costs about 25% of its brand new price, but it's perfectly adequate for addressing sort of IT poverty that exists, both with young people, both with elderly people as an increasing challenge. So there's a whole, massive demand for that IT equipment that we try and meet that bit by being able to sell, high quality products still that have reached the end of their first working life. We try to extend that working life further, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I'm just take it on board. Just there's a lot of things there because just specifically if we look at the current landscape, apologies, my meter's run out, so the light's gone down, but hopefully you can still see me.
Yeah.
With sort of given that people with lockdown, there's been a lot of offices that have closed down. A lot of people might for instance, my husband he works for a global retail brand. I'm not going to sort of say more than that, but they don't go to their national centres anymore, and they're having to sort of like think about what do they do, because they've got masses of equipment. So sort of how are you finding things with those companies in order to that on the one hand, you've got all these companies with this equipment that they're not using. And then on the flip side of that, you're hearing stories at schools where, people being homeschooled and they've not got the equipment. They've not got the right equipment to use.
It's been sort of quite frustrating really, because at the moment that, our impressions are it's an awful lot, there's still, the majority of people are still working from home, aren't they? Sort of former colleagues of mine have not been into the office since March in different places. So we know there's a hell of a lot of office equipment that's not being used. What we found is, so to put it in the context, because we usually do about 100 collections from clients a month in pre-COVID days. During lockdown 1, that reduced to 1 collection a week. So we saw a reduction in activity of over 95%, which is a bit painful. We've only seen things come back to about 75% during the autumn. Then it's dropped off again a little bit during lockdown 3. We're only now seeing any real significant return to business, I would say. And we are seeing clients come back in action that haven't been in touch with us for 9 to 10 months. And so the impression we have is there's an awful lot of redundant IT equipment sat in offices all around the country. And one of the reasons why it's not been addressed is because the majority of staff are still being furloughed.
Okay.
We get very few email responses on a Monday and a Friday because I think people are furloughed. Interestingly, the busiest days we get in terms of contact are Tuesdays and Thursdays. Because I think if people are on a shortened week, that would tend to be the days that they're actually working. We do a lot of NHS support work. We do logistics work for the NHS storage work, as well as the traditional IT asset disposal work. We did try to organise during lockdown 1 that we would borrow IT equipment from clients to loan to the NHS because there's a massive need for it. We got a little bit of interest, but not a massive amount of interest. And I think one of the biggest factors was that simply the staff weren't there to actually do the work required at the client end. And also it would need us to be on site on premises to actually audit the equipment. And obviously for COVID purposes, having people on site, despite all of the protocols, was still very high risk, certainly during lockdown 1. A little bit less risk now because we understand the disease more, understand the virus more, and you can take more proactive action. So we are anticipating a significant uplift in activity during Q2 because I think we're probably moving towards a sort of hybrid working situation where people will go into the office 2 to 3 days a week and work from home a couple of days a week, which would probably mean the likes of the sort of desktop PC probably aren't so required as a sort of having a laptop or a mobile device. Now, there's an interesting market around desktop PCs for like education. So not the autumn just gone, but the previous autumn, we helped out a school in Lincolnshire. Their IT equipment was 10 years old and was no longer capable of accessing the online curriculum they were being issued. So we were able to refurbish their whole IT suite with 17 recycled PCs that were sort of 2 generations newer, and we were able to sell those machines to them for £60 plus the Windows license. Now, the brand new version would have been about £400 and was completely beyond the school's budget. So we feel there's quite a big demand that can be met. We do feel there's a lot of equipment to come down the track towards us. So it's probably quite, potentially quite an exciting time, but, there's a massive demand for people, for people that cannot access what they need to access. I mean, my wife volunteers at the food bank in Taunton. Some of the stories that come back from there are heartbreaking because everything you need to access is online. But if you're poor, some of these people are in dreadful situations. They don't have the online technology to access it, or can afford it, and that's a real problem. So there's quite a few sort of challenges, quite a few challenges around it, but also there are a lot of solutions there. We feel sort of it just sat idle at the moment. And it's, the more that we can do to help everybody, the more we can do to take that redundant equipment and put it back into active use, the better.
Wow. So what's thoughts, Simon?
Sorry?
I think Simon's looked like he wants to say something.
Myself.
Right.
I'm waving my hands about because that demonstrates, Mike, exactly where we are in terms of sustainable resource expenditure and everything else, because those companies, those IT companies supplying to the big corporates and to the education and to NHS and everything else, will be supplying that IT stuff to a spec, to a requirement that they think the end user needs, right? And it's in their interest to build as much functionality and everything else into that, and to build up to a nice price that's going to be their turnover. Now, what you've demonstrated there is that the inbuilt obsolescence of actually replacing those, quite rightly, as you say, every 5 years as the business needs, those computers are naturally still of use to somewhere where that high spec, high demand, high security, everything else isn't actually quite as needed as it is in their case, straight into an education market where the needs are actually less and the requirement, it can still fit that requirement quite adequately. So you've replaced a brand new computer in that market quite easily. So if that's the mindset that you could develop, I'm talking about you generally, rather than a simply replace it because it says it's 5 years and that's what it says on our company sustainability plan, think a little bit more widely, guys, because your sustainability plan should be, let's look at appropriate replacement where necessary and where developments have made things obsolete, not because they just happen to be 5 years old. Get out of this built-in obsolescence thing where you replace because of the date, not because of the functionality.
Yeah, I think
it's really interesting point. I think just picking up on what Simon said there, I think from a real short term, what's really interesting is looking at that sustainability about how long you can have something for. I think not a concern, but I think we're going to start to see is obviously everybody wants to get back on their feet again. Everything wants to get the wheels running again, and I think there will be a real focus on let's start getting business in again. And there's an element from yesterday's budget is there is now an incentive for more capital assets. So more and more people are going to be looking for capital assets, and that may counter what you were just saying, Simon, which I fully agree with, is having longevity in machines. And it makes me smile that we've got a particular company we work with who are a manufacturer of a tooling machine and a grinding machine, and they've been making them for nearly 100 years. And some of those machines from 70 or 80 years ago are still working today. So when you look at that, that's the other challenge. I think over the last 20 or 30 years, there was a change in mindset that let's not make things too good because otherwise we won't have a business. So you've always got to be changing. So I think that's another challenge. There's a short-term challenge and a long-term challenge.
Well, that's absolutely right. Let's not forget that Mr. Coleman, the mustard maker, is quite open about the fact that he made his business on what people leave on the side of their plate. So you're oversupplying the consumer with something he doesn't actually want, he doesn't need, but you're actually giving it to him anyway because that's the size of the packet. End of story. Very interesting that in terms of resource scarcity. But there we are.
But But it's kind of, I suppose it kind of touches upon the element of business modeling as well, because, you know, looking at your whole business ecosystem, you know, the quote I like, and, you know, I know I'm going to misquote it, is, you know, sort of the Prince Charles, like, sort of, you know, people get back into sort of the mend it, fix it mentality of, you know, and that's somewhat's been lost, because, for instance, what you're saying, Simon, is that when things go down, people, you know, people's automatic instinct is just to replace it, instead of, you know, and that's probably one of the reasons why, in terms of trades, in terms of, you know, those kind of skills, they're sort of like, well, not quite a dying breed, but they're not, you know, you don't get people, you know, with those kind of skills so prevalent anymore. A lot of guys, you know, don't know how to fix things because they've never been taught how to fix things. So it's, yeah, so it's like, you know, if you look at your business model and, like, you know, yeah, obviously people want to sell all that stuff, but if, you know, if instead of producing so many of those core units, and it's like, you know, how to sort of, like, you know, replacement parts, and, you know, if you try to look for a part for anything, it's now impossible for many appliances these days. So I suppose that's kind of building that into the solution. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
Nobody fixes any parts
Yeah.
now. It costs too much time. It's easy just to replace a part, whether it be cars, whether it be washing machines, whether it be anything. Nobody actually fixes anything now. It's just a new part goes in, that's it. You don't actually take it out, you know, you don't strip it out like you used to. If you used to have an old car, you know, you might do a bit of grinding and messing about with the car. You fix it.
But
Now it's replace it.
No, 100%, because this kind of gets back to the central question a while back, is, you know, are they sort of like competing forces, you know, ensuring sustainability of the environment against, you know, sort of sustainability of our core business. If we want to keep selling, keep creating and making things, you know, and almost at the risk of, you know, the fixing, the repairing, is there a way that you can sort of make them compatible?
It's difficult because, as you say, the business models have totally changed to how manufacturers cope, how they work. You know, it is sort of sell more, use more, you know, we sell it to different countries for them to recycle them in different ways. And like Phil says and Simon says, it's basically they're left there to the time that actually somebody then gets hold of them and reuses them. But could it be that nobody wants to pay the amounts, nobody wants to wait that length of time to get it fixed? You know, it's all these aspects that you've got to consider. It is a very throwaway culture that we've got. But we've only got a finite amount of resources. I mean, if you're talking about gas and oil, that's going to run out soon. I mean, if you talk about how long have we had we've had motor cars and petrol and things like that. I mean, you're talking about 150 years of use of oil or 200 years of use of oil before it's all gone. What do we use next?
I think there needs to be a wider sort of macro conversation at the minute on the back of COVID. You know, if you know, if there's one thing that's highlighted the dominance of China across the sort of world in terms of financial power, trade markets, and different things, nothing could do that more powerfully than COVID. We can argue about, you can discuss how it started, how it didn't start, whether it escaped from the laboratory or not, but the facts are that it seemed to be that it was in China first off. Australia had the temerity to actually call China out on what had happened, and so China has systematically punished Australia quite brutally in terms of, you know, economic action. Now, I think collectively the economy sort of you know, the West, you know, you call it Western economies, America, different places. We've got to decide what we're going to do about Chinese, you know, the Chinese domination and power, because if you look at the, you know, the surge and sort of the growth during the probably the late 90s and early 2000s was on the basis of production being, European production was exported to China because the cost was so cheap. If you look at the cost of power tools or anything, power tools have become disposable because they're so cheap, but they're produced in China or different places. But we have to start accepting that comes at a cost. And until we start to actually look at a wider angle of things, and it's part of that sort of bigger problem of, the power of China is becoming a problem. They don't need to fight a war. They are they are capturing precious resources that other countries do not have. They're investing in countries in Africa and around the world that control the market in certain things. So there is a dominance and a power there that we do have that the world, or large chunks of the world have a problem with if it's not countered in a collective way.
Yeah.
You can see if you take individual action like Australia did, then you get clobbered. Cybercrime activity tends to come out of Romania, Russia, and China. We're the last lines of cyber defense. We should have talked to some of the people, some of the people we're involved with. It's quite frightening, to be honest. Some of the things, we had a demonstration of the power of the dark web by one firm about a month ago. And I mean, to be honest, I wish I'd not watched it. Because, in terms of your everyday activities, you are really almost relying on luck that they don't pick you up, because they are so powerful. They are so good at what they do. It is impossible to be 100% to defend it 100%.
Okay, so I'm just thinking it might be a good opportunity to sort of reframe the question. Then is it's about looking for what it means in terms of engineering, manufacturing businesses, and what does a company need to bear in mind if it wants to develop a sustainable platform. So I'm just trying to think of two things. Is what are the opportunities of pursuing a sustainable policy in context of how an organisation operates, and we've touched upon them, but we might just be able to go through them again. Is what are the challenges of pursuing this sustainable policy? Because there's going to be lots of opportunities, but then what do we need to bear in mind in order to deliver that?
I'm going to dip out for about 10 minutes, guys. So go off camera and off mic. Just got to read some things, but we'll listen in if that's okay. Do apologise.
That's absolutely fine. Thanks for participating.
That's right, but I will keep listening, honest.
So does anyone have any points about in terms of what the opportunities then?
I think from an opportunities point of view, the range of products that are going to be coming to the fore and coming to the market that address sustainability in a different way, I think is quite important. And that is whether it is an electric vehicle or a hydrogen vehicle, hydrogen cell vehicle, or it is the way that you do things and the resource that those things use being more sustainable. I think that's very, very important. I think if you look at a great plays given in replacing old vehicles for new vehicles, and a lot of reason given for replacing old vehicles with new vehicles is the fact that the old vehicles' engines are polluting and whatever. Well, guess what? The pleasure of driving in an old vehicle with old kit, old drivetrain, and all the rest of it, you can actually now very, very successfully take a classic vehicle and put an electric motor in it, or a hydrogen cell motor in it, very successfully, and the companies around the country that do that. So anybody who thinks that any of the vehicles that we've got now that are classics have now got an end of life because you're not going to maintain that diesel engine or whatever, rubbish. You can actually replace that motive unit with another motive unit. And that once again is opportunity within there for skilled people within the UK to do that, whether it's the fitting, whether it's coming up with the motive units, or whether it's servicing those with the new problems that progresses. And that's a very, very small advantage, example of where the opportunities might be. There's a considerable range of opportunities that are going to arise because of the different way that we've got to approach things from a sustainability agenda. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what Simon's saying. I think we've got to do it. You can't get away from it. And it's interesting. I just come back to the consumer one, and then I will just answer on that engineering manufacturing question properly there, Sean. It's just from a consumer perspective, you've probably there's two schools of thought at the moment, or two things that are happening. If you look at a consumer and you look at, and I suppose I can answer it fairly well. My wife has got an upcycling company. So she does upcycling of furniture. So G-Plan furniture from the 70s and 80s in that awful kind of brown, which was the trend of that day, they're able to upcycle. And there's a big push in that area. And there's a company that she has a paint from, a British company, started 4 years ago now, is in 40 odd countries and is doing great things. So people are interested in those kind of things. And I think you have got people who want to use sustainable products, they want to upcycle, they want to do that. But I still come back to engineering and manufacturing. The one area that every company that is engineering or manufacturing needs is power. They need power to do what they do. So for me, the biggest opportunity is looking at renewable energy, and should the government be investing in that? Should there be more grants in that? Because that's the commonality across all of that industry, is power. And so you're going to have to look at those different ways. And there's biomass. There's obviously, I've spoken about water and solar and wind, but there needs to be a solid investment in there, and there actually needs to be support to do that. Because if there isn't support, the companies won't do it. The shareholders will go, well, we'll keep on taking the profits, thank you. So I think there needs to be something, and that to me would be the big opportunity, is to look at something like that.
Consider China again. How many fields in the UK does China have with solar panels? So they're investing in it. Why don't we? So I totally agree with you there.
It's very interesting, and that's a very, very good point, Les, because don't forget, there are sustainability costs of all these things. It's already well buying the thing cheap from China if it's a solar panel or a car or a headphone earpiece or anything else. The money cost is small, but the sustainability cost is much, much larger, as is the built-in difficulty in recycling that. For instance, the wind turbine blades at the moment that we're producing, we're repowering those wind turbines now with bigger units and more powerful units. And the blades at the moment cannot be recycled. They're just being, in America, they are being put in a field and being covered with earth, if you're lucky. But if you're not lucky, they're just left there. Now that in itself will come to this country. The same with solar panels. Solar panels will be exactly the same. And there is so much resource locked up in those solar panels as they're replaced and as they are made redundant or obsolete, or worse still, broken or vandalized or whatever. So that sort of thing needs to be, you need to be looking at the sustainability of recycling, of reuse of these things, very much more importantly. And Mike has put his finger on that absolutely on the button today. That is a very big part of the sustainability and should be part of the opportunity that there is, because there is business in making things work again. There is business in making things more cost effective to make, because that brings the whole job, that one person's job, that one person's resource use, power use and everything else into the UK, whereas before it was elsewhere. And that brings down the sustainability cost and up the actual value to the UK and UK industry and UK manufacturing. Let's face it.
I think, and it brings around to the point, if there's one thing that the UK has always been, very, very strong on is innovation, it's entrepreneurialism and creating stuff. So I suppose, again, that's, these are very big problems that, fit in under the engineering and manufacturing window. Like, how can we address those big problems, and sort of like in terms of repositioning, repurposing these items, because, I suppose the innovation side of it is going to present an opportunity for those with the skills to enable.
It just takes me back to what I said earlier, that nothing should be made that's not recyclable or reusable or biodegradable. In this day and age, we shouldn't do it. And if there's products available, we've got to use them. I've got a question about wind turbine, wind generation. Has it ever made a profit yet?
It makes money. Whether it ever makes a profit depends on whose balance sheet you're looking at. Are you looking at the balance sheet of the people producing them, that they're making money because they're getting paid for it? What about the people who put it up? They're getting money because they've put the thing up and been paid for doing so. But where is the real cost of that? Where is the real cost of that? And the real cost of that is in the sustainability detriment, really, I think, to be frank. to the fact
That's
that
where I was coming from. It was
absolutely most of the
what is-
manufacture of that wind turbine is unsustainable from
Yeah.
from a green point of view. It's a fact. It just is.
Yeah.
And even though steel itself is a different example, because the circularity and the recyclableness of steel is very, very important, as is aluminium actually. It still takes an awful lot of non-green electricity to generate, to actually process steel back from its waste scrap into freshly used engineering steel. So all of these have a sustainability agenda. So I think resource scarcity and resource limitation should be very closely on everybody's sustainability agenda. And that includes voltage optimization of incoming power supplies. That includes high efficiency motors where possible. That it includes intelligent artificial intelligence in terms of looking at how your processes work and how they have been improved and how they can self-improve. And we're going on there onto the cyber that Phil was talking rightly about earlier, in terms of how the heck can we get over this? Well, that's what these tools are there for. AI is there for us to learn from ourselves, sometimes even without knowing it. But that's what AI is all about. One of the things that it's all about, but that's one of the things that it's all about.
Yeah, totally agree.
I'm just taking it all in, like, you know, these, you know, so I'm just trying to think, you know, as we're probably going to be sort of like wrapping up fairly short, you know, around the topic, is there any, you know, it's sort of like, you know, just trying to sort of like summarize about, you know, sort of the main point. So sort of like what's anyone drawing from the conversation in terms of key actions going forward?
I think just on the corporate side, the one thing I would say is that please, from a sustainability point of view, the reasons for you stating sustainability and going on about sustainability need to be real, and they need to be felt, and they need to be heartfelt within your organization, and for the right reasons. Not just saying we've got a sustainability policy and it says this or whatever. It needs to be, you mean it. You mean it. You mean that's in the way that you procure your stuff, you make your stuff, you sell your stuff, and you treat your workers and your employees and right the way across the chain of activity and stakeholders that you deal with. You've got to mean it, because without that, you don't have the, what do they call, the genuineness that is needed in business to really get that integrity together and make a good business truly sustainable.
It's a living concept, sustainability.
Yeah.
You need that living concept. It's not just something you can attach a word to or attach a partly ideas to, or yeah, we do a bit of that, or we do, you either do it or you don't.
I think the past 12 months there's been a real shift to the importance to consumers, the sustainability and social responsibility actually mean what it says. It's not just the last 6 pages in an annual report. The conversations that we've been having with some of our bigger clients really bring home that it's really, really important. The procurement side of it is really important. What I'm working on now is a social value, is, you know, the tender that we're just trying to complete. There's quite a large section about social values.
Social responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's, I think it is really, really important, and I think probably if there's one program that's probably been the biggest catalyst for change, it's sort of a series of programs. It's probably David Attenborough and Blue Planet, and actually seeing the impact of microplastic in the oceans on marine animals.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the one thing that has probably hammered it home to so many people about what the impact of plastics in particular are. I think probably the past 12 months has probably emphasised, I would like to think it's probably emphasised what's really important in life to a few, you know, to many people. Having worked for some, you know, for very large organisations, you know, my original background was banking. What was very important to sort of senior executives in banking, I think in the real world now we can see what's, you know, I think value is slightly different. So I think it is, you know, the having worked sort of extent, you know, for quite some time in renewable energy, which is how Simon and myself know each other. Then it felt you were swimming against the tide a little bit with an awful lot of, you know, with a lot of people, and certainly with government support, which was, you know, poorly directed. I think it's changed around a lot, and I think, you know, there's an opportunity, I think, that was an opportunity for all businesses, but I really think that, I think the balance is tipped in the favour of sustainability. We just got to push through it and really sort of clarify what that means, get everybody to fully understand the message and actually properly commit to it, because I think there's an appetite for it amongst the consumer at whatever level, and if businesses don't adapt, then I don't think they'll survive.
Good.
I'm going to have to dip
Totally
out now,
agree.
guys. I do apologise. Right, thanks for allowing me to join. I've enjoyed it. Apologies I wasn't able to join for longer, but if we're successful in getting this it's a bid for Kent County Council, but it's linked to 9 other councils as well. So it's fairly we're quite keen to do a good job to do quite a good job to it. So I've enjoyed it. Apologies I can't stay for longer, but thank you for putting up with me.
No, you're absolutely welcome, and thanks for participating. It's been really enjoyable hearing your comments on this. So, but so in terms of conclusion, then I suppose to answer those two, that central question about competing against the commercial elements of sustainability against the environmental elements, there's a way to align them, but there's still some way to go. And it's in terms of thinking, it's education, it's who do you engage, it's how do you skill, and it's addressing the whole sort of big picture. It's like trying to engage with your whole ecosystem to deliver on that sort of like core aim. I'm just going to go around the room, probably best thing to do, just to see if anyone's got any sort of like parting comments on the topic. Sorry, shall I go? I'll nominate Simon.
Yeah, sorry.
Or anyone.
Go first if you want.
Yep, feel free.
Carry on.
Sorry.
Carry on.
It's just what Simon was saying. It's got to be a lemon concept. It's something you've got to either do or you don't. But the thing is, the benefit of doing it is outweighs anything, because it must be done. We've got a finite amount of resources available. It's going down and down. And if we don't use sustainability in the right way and live with sustainability, then our planet won't be here in the future. And we won't be with it. Going back to David Attenborough.
I think his documentaries is probably something that's really driven it to the core of what everyone's trying to achieve. So either Phil or Simon, if you want to move to your comments.
Happy to come in. I just made a couple of finishing notes really of listening to the conversations around the table. I think we probably need to move away from using the word of life cycle for things and probably moving it towards an evolving use of whatever it is. So it may morph and change, but it's the evolution of what it is, and really picking up on what Simon and Les were saying about, it's evolution, it's evolving, but it can't be a start and a finish. Once something's finished, what can you do with it? So for me, I'd move away from a life cycle of something and just look at the evolving use of the thing, whatever the thing is.
Brilliant. Simon?
I think as well, it's very important from whether you're a manufacturer or a remanufacturer or a recycler. It's very important to look upwards and downwards on your backwards into your supply chain and forwards into your production chain, your sale chain, and your reclaim chain. You're bringing stuff back sometimes to redo and what have you. It's very important to make sure that you're as sustainable as you can be right across that board, and that should be guiding who you choose as your suppliers, and it should be guiding, if you like, who even you choose to distribute your product and how they choose to distribute it. And I think that should be part of your selection process, not just cash. Cash is king, we all know that, but it doesn't need to be controlling what you do from a sustainability point of view. You can do things more sustainably with differently based resources. It's just a question of using your head to have that sustainability hat on and know that that's in the top of your mind, because it is all about saving costs, saving resource, saving energy, all of those things.
Fantastic. No, thank you very much. This has been a really engaging conversation. I've certainly learned a lot and lots to think about, and definitely we have to get this out there, because I think there's an amazing amount of insights and incredible value in what everyone's shared today. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, lovely. Nice
Thank
to meet
you.
everyone. Thank you
Very
very
much indeed.
much.
Excellent.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So okay to cut. Do you want to come in, Pete?
No, that's fine. Thank you for that. Sorry, I'm also in another meeting over here, just kicking off one of the other sessions. So thank you one and all. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. It's been an absolute pleasure. Anyway, hope to. Well, I'm connected with you, but let's connect, Les. It's great to have a conversation offline.
We'll get the links when the recordings are in play. I'll get the links out to you.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
joining
Really
us, Les.
appreciate it.
Very much so.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you very much indeed. We will see you soon.